Well, almost 4 months after the elementary school shooting that stunned the country, a breakthrough has been reached in the push for new gun control. The Senate could hold its first vote today after a compromise on background checks. Now, the deal was reached by Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Republican Senator Patrick Toomey of Pennsylvania. It could expand background checks to all commercial gun sales, including gun shows and internet sales, but not private sales among family and friends. Senators Manchin and Toomey call their compromise a common sense agreement.
We have an agreement on an amendment to prevent criminals and the mentally ill and insane from getting firearms and harming people.
I don't consider criminal background checks to be gun control. I think it's just common sense. If you pass a criminal background check, you get to buy a gun. It's no problem. It's the people who fail a criminal or a mental health background check that we don't want having guns.
So joining us from Washington is Juana Summers, defense reporter for Politico. Thanks for joining us this morning, Juana.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about Joe Manchin and Pat Toomey. If you're not from those two states, chances are you don't know them, but they've sort of become the face of this new gun control legislation. How did that happen?
That's absolutely right. They are both certainly unlikely characters for most folks outside of Washington or their districts to know. What's important to know about them, though, is they are from states where gun laws and gun rights are very important. If you look at someone like Pat Toomey, for example, a Republican out of Pennsylvania, the National Rifle Association actually spent $1.5 million helping to push behind his reelection bid. So he's a particularly interesting face to have at the forefront of this debate that some conservatives and some of those from the South and the Midwest and those red states would argue is actually limiting gun rights. So we have two very unique characters at the front of this debate that has been consuming Capitol Hill over the last few weeks.
All right, so how about this bipartisan spirit? Do you think it's something that could spread to the rest of Congress and maybe we could see a bipartisan deal? What's the likelihood of that?
Well, absolutely. I'm sure everyone would love to see that finally wrap up. But here's the thing. A lot of Republicans in the House and some in the Senate argue that the kind of deal that the Senators Manchin and Toomey are proposing would actually not help curb the number of deaths by gun violence, such as we saw at Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown, Connecticut. They argue instead that current laws aren't being enforced, and that's the bigger problem we need to be dealing with. There's still a lot of opposition to this bill, though it looks like it'll clear the first hurdle on Thursday today and go to floor debate in the Senate.
And the NRA issued a response that sort of echoes what you just said. It says in part that expanding background checks at gun shows will not prevent the next shooting, will not solve violent crime, and will not keep our kids safe in schools. Now, you mentioned the support that the NRA has given Pat Toomey. They didn't mention his name or criticize him for his involvement, but sort of gave this sort of general, somewhat vague statement. How was that statement received?
Right, and it's important to know as well that the NRA is putting pressure on members it has supported in the past. Their legislative director announced on Wednesday that they will be scoring this vote. They don't typically score procedural votes, so if you see those ratings that senators have an A from the NRA, they'll be looking at this vote to see how they view senators in the future as gun friendly. If you're someone who's from, say, Texas or Missouri, where I'm from, or Kansas, that's got to make you a little bit nervous in voting for this, despite the fact that you are looking at a proposal that has bipartisan support. So far, we just have two Republican members, Pat Toomey and Mark Kirk of Illinois, who say they are really ready to get behind this proposal. A lot of Republicans still have just not picked up quite yet. It'll be interesting to see how today's vote plays out.
Yeah, you mentioned just how much money the NRA invested in Pat Toomey's campaign. Moving forward, we know the organization has a tremendous amount of influence. What do you think their effect will be?
It absolutely does have a tremendous amount of influence, and as many of these senators are looking toward re-election, if they tend to buck the NRA's influence and vote in favor of this proposal or other gun-related legislation that Senator Harry Reid might bring to the Senate floor, it could play heavily and cost them in elections, perhaps bring in some new grassroots conservative blood into some of these very critical states. But it's important to note there are also other interest groups like Mayors for Illegal Guns playing very heavily here, so there's a lot of outside group interest certainly in this very volatile issue.
And another one of those groups, the victims from the Sandy Hook Elementary massacre, the parents, they've been talking one-on-one with certain senators. Are they having the effect that they had hoped to have?
I think that they are certainly having some effect. You saw them today specifically speaking with Senator Manchin as well as Texas Senator Ted Cruz. There's no question that there's an emotional core to this debate after that shooting in a spate of gun violence that has become quite the epidemic nationwide. And I think that they are certainly bringing a lot more people who might not have been interested in having these types of discussions about gun laws and background checks into this discussion now.
Yeah, we're looking at video right there of some of the parents, and you know, some of them have tears in their eyes. They're wiping away tears. I don't know how you cannot be moved. It's a tough situation. Another person entering the fray who we really haven't heard from, the First Lady. She was in Chicago today. She was speaking at Harper High School. Why do you think she decided to address gun control?
The First Lady rarely wades into political issues such as these. She is mostly stuck to more socially driven causes. But being from Chicago, which has been known for its high levels of violence, and having a student who actually performed in the inaugural parade gunned down just 2 weeks later, I think that it obviously proved a moment for her to go out and speak on something that her husband has staked so much political capital to. President Obama, when first speaking out after the Newtown shooting, said he would do everything his office had in its power in order to make a change to these laws to make sure these types of shootings don't happen again. And it seems that that the White House obviously found deploying Michelle Obama in this emotional, very powerful speech as a great asset.
Juana Summers, defense reporter for Politico, thanks so much.
Thank you.